mommy bloggers, and it was very exciting to be into the current century, and it was so surprising how, for me, how so many of the questions were really how important is it for me to feed my kid or feed my kid out, because it's so hard to make ends meet with my family budget, especially at this time. And it was really kind of, I really had to really stretch myself, because I'm usually the organic advocate, and really reassure people that yes, it's better to feed your kid a non-organic apple than not buy an organic apple because you can't afford it.
Right.
And so it would be, it's unfortunate that this healthy, whole, beautiful food, whether organic or conventional, is so expensive for the average person in contrast to these processed foods.
Understand. Mike?
I think that is a big issue. I mean, our subsidy system, in effect, is underwriting the most processed foods, stuff made from corn and soy, and it doesn't do very much for people. I mean, this last Farm Bill, actually, there's more money for specialty crops. And, you know, what we call them specialty crops. I mean, what a weird idea. When I got to California, I was like, what do you mean? It's just food. It's real food. It's food you can eat. And that's mostly what is grown in this state. And our farm policy has been geared toward another kind of agriculture. It's another case where our farm policies and our healthcare agenda are fighting with one another. And that we should be working to, you know, support access to fresh fruits and vegetables and not be supporting the twins. And you can't subsidize broccoli. Anyone who understands agriculture knows that you'll get an overproduction of broccoli, and unlike corn or soy, you can't put it in a silo and store it. It's a real problem having a lot of broccoli around. So you need to figure out ways to subsidize demand. You need to give the schools enough money to buy fresh produce so they can Going back to something Gary said, you know, I completely agree with him about the importance of teaching people all around the world how to grow food with more success and more efficiently. But that goal and overproducing here, growing as much as we can and shipping as much as we can, those goals are often at odds. And it's very important for all of us who've kind of accepted uncritically this wonderful phrase of feeding the world to understand what that often means in practice. It often means that our ability to sell food, very often below the cost of production because of subsidies and things like that, makes it hard for people elsewhere to feed themselves. And that our policy as a country for many years has been to tell the developing world, don't invest in agriculture. Figure out something else. Buy our cheap food. It's not smart for you to invest in agriculture because we can do it so much more cheaply. And this was our advice, this was the World Bank's advice, this was the IMF's advice. And in 2008, many countries discovered what a disaster that was. And that, you know, putting yourself at the mercy of, grain speculators on Wall Street and ethanol policies in Washington is very, very dangerous. So of his two comments, I would align myself most strongly with the let's teach people how to grow food. Let's encourage them to have a vital agriculture. They're not going to feed themselves entirely, and we're not going to feed ourselves entirely, but to the extent that we can. That food security flows not from one country growing, too much food and dumping it on the rest of the world. After NAFTA, 1.5 million Mexican farmers were thrown off the land. A lot of the workers who come up here during that boom in illegal immigration were driven off the land by corn flowing south. So we have to realize that feeding the world is a little more complicated than it sometimes sounds.
Oh, absolutely. It is complex. I want to get to an audience member's question. I'm going to direct it to Myra first. Help them to understand. Please explain how a conventional farm business could feasibly and economically convert or to at least position some of their operation, if that's what they choose, to an organic business model? What are some of the experiences that you had in that transition period? And what are the safety nets that might exist or not exist
Right.
for?
Well, now there's a bit of government help in that way, but I think like most people know, there's a 3-year transition
Right.
to take your land from conventional to organic. And that transition time is very expensive for the farmer. I mean, we actually used to grow crops organically. They weren't certified organic and sell them in the conventional market. But really, the conventional soils aren't really conducive to growing a really productive crop. And we realized that it is much more efficient for us to just keep cover cropping and enriching the health of the soil and getting it to a point where after 3 years, you can start growing a successful organic crop. So I think that really is one of the biggest costs and one of the biggest barriers to entry. But it is, what's amazing and why I think so many people call organic farming sustainable farming is we've been doing this for 25 years now, and seeing that besides our current problem with spinach, and we're having a little problem with arugula, that our soils are getting more and more productive over time. That these organic soils, they're much more efficient in terms of using water. We're recycling waste products back onto the farm from other industries. It is much more sustainable, and as there is urban encroachment, when we're talking about 9 billion people in 2050, you're able to farm organically right up to a school and right up to homes. You don't need these buffers because you're using chemicals. And so far, even though now organic feels very competitive to me because I was here when there was really no one else, from what I understand conventionally, there's no competition in organic compared to what there is in conventional, and prices tend to be at least high enough to try and meet ends meet most of the time. So there's that economic incentive, I think, for a lot of growers.
And that may scare a lot of listeners, that transition period of time is
That transition period, and that's why Earthbound Farm as we started growing really rapidly, and we really started growing rapidly because of our spring mix business, and people were buying our products before they were interested in organic just because it was a unique product. The way that we were able to grow and keep up with demand was through partnerships. And first with Mission Ranches and then with Moore and Ansel, because they brought in farmland and the resources and the commitment to transition ground to organic for us, because that's a huge investment.
Absolutely. Let's get to another audience member's question. This is a good one, and I'm going to start with Michael as a teacher here, Michael. I'm a middle school agriculture science teacher. How do you suggest I teach my students how to take part in sustainable agriculture? We'll go through the panel here. If you can keep your questions, answer briefly, then I'll get to some more questions because I know there's a lot of them.
That's a really good question. I guess I would start with gardening. And I think that's a great place to learn about where your food comes from, to reconnect with it, and find the challenges too. I mean, gardeners have to struggle with pests also, and fertility and all this kind of stuff. And that you can build a fantastic curriculum out of what goes on in the garden. Especially if you could then combine it with cooking classes and, weird as this sounds, eating classes. Learn how to eat at the table and sit still. I think, bringing the whole food chain into the classroom as young as possible is critically important. We are so disconnected from our food. And if you garden, you immediately have an appreciation for the work of farmers.
Absolutely.
And you don't begrudge them the price they need to make a living. And I know that was my experience. I got into this through gardening, and that was my love of growing food and my recognition of the challenges of growing food. So I guess that's how I would approach that challenge. Gardening.
Yeah, we have a farm stand in Carmel Valley, and we have thousands of kids come and take farm tours. Right now it's exciting because it's the pumpkins. But when we take them through the fields, what's really amazing is there are kids that say they hate peas, they don't want to try a pea, and then they open a fresh English pea and they eat a pea. And suddenly they love peas and they want peas. And they pull a carrot out of the ground and they rinse it and they eat a carrot. And so I think when kids see things growing, they see the miracle of pulling something out of the ground or digging for potatoes, it's like a treasure hunt, and they eat something really fresh, then their memories of those foods really kind of take over the memories of the canned peas, or they realize that that's something that they actually really want to eat, that they might rather sit. My kids will sit and watch TV and just shell peas and eat peas for hours, and they don't want potato chips. So
that's good. So we have to have a tactile experience with our food as well.
Right.
Similar to ourselves.
Yeah, and
Taste.
yeah.
Absolutely no question. I grew up in 4-H and FFA. My sister grew up in FHA, Future Homemakers of America. What we need to do is just reinstill a real drive in the public school system to have vocational agriculture and vocational homemaking as part of our education process.